Hi there, Professor Nagy here, trying a new way to record the videos. You won't see my face, but you'll see the PowerPoint for class, which is listed on the course Blackboard as well, and my voice going through. Um, One of the suggestions that I have as you're viewing this video is you have some options. You can use this recording as an audio to just follow along with the PowerPoint itself. So you could download the PowerPoint and follow along with just the audio, or you can watch it. I am not going to show all of the links that are embedded within the PowerPoint itself, which is why I suggest that you use this more as an audio than a video. But I'll let you decide what's best for you. So now that we've had a syllabus review, we are going to go kind of an overview of GIS, kind of what to expect and the context for learning GIS. So we're in the introductory GIS class known as GIS Principles. In the past, it's been known also as Foundations of GIS, but generally it's GIS Principles. And that description, GIS Principles, just that term, gives you a good idea of kind of foundational concepts and knowledge that's helpful to know when before you get started with using a GIS. Like, why do we use a GIS, the history of GIS, but also kind of the governing bodies of GIS technology, geospatial information. So this overview will give you a little bit more context in terms of kind of where you might fall in the world of GIS. Are you a GIS user? Do you want a GIS career? What do you want to do with this GIS knowledge? So let's get started. So moving on to the next slide, I'll put it in presentation mode actually. All right. Course description, again, this is from the syllabus and from the class schedule. This is the description. Again, the course focuses on principles of GIS as a tool to provide geospatial information analysis and displaying results using industry standard map design and output. So we're going to learn some cartographic techniques as well as some foundational concepts. When we get to the software, you'll learn more about how to hands-on use the software to import attribute and spatial data, recognize important components of cartography to design appropriate maps, understanding maps in general. Map knowledge, map literacy is a really important skill to have. If you're going to be making maps, then you need to know how maps, the different ways that maps can be presented, the different types, and are you able to understand what the map is trying to convey? That is one of the key takeaways from this class is, can you design a map and can you interpret a map with the information that's included on the actual map document itself. You're going to learn how to do queries, ask the GIS questions based on the data that's within it. This is a problem-solving exercise. There will be steps. All of this is spatial analysis. Spatial means some point locational information. It has a place on the earth. So that is what spatial means, is that it is land-based, earth-based, not necessarily land-based because it could also incorporate water, but again, any place on the face of the earth. That's what we're talking about. And towards the end, the second half of the class, we'll get into the lab exercises to incorporate the use of QGIS software, also known as Quantum GIS, as the tool that we're using to learn GIS. Moving on to the next, I just wanted to point out some pre or co-requisite knowledge that goes along with this class. The UST 404, which is a data analysis class, kind of understanding some of the foundational concepts of quantitative analysis, and this meets a quantitative literacy skill set. Urban research decisions and procedures for obtaining empirical knowledge, meaning it can be, the research can be replicated so that you can get the same answer in different ways. So this is the co-requisite knowledge that's associated with the UST 404, and why you had to take it as a co-requisite or prereq for this class. We want to understand how to extract the meaning of urban data, and in GIS's case, spatial data. Empirical means based on, concerned with, or verifiable by observation or experience rather than theory or pure logic. So can you create an experiment? Can you develop a problem that is set up to provide you with the correct answer? Empirical research often includes charts, graphs, or statistical analysis. And maps are a type of chart, and they can be supplemented with graphs and employ statistics as a way of describing geographic findings. So GIS, again, is very much a technical and quantitative tool. Not to say that you can't examine information qualitatively, or that there isn't qualitative information that goes along with spatial data, but maps are kind of their own beast, in that they are a way to communicate information in a way that's visually pleasing. It's easier to understand. We're visual learners by nature. And so maps can say a lot and can teach us a lot without a whole lot of technical abilities. So map literacy as well. Moving on to the next slide, the GIS and T body of knowledge. That's GIS and technology body of knowledge. This is developed by the University Consortium for GIS Science. They have defined the GIS body of knowledge, and you'll see BOK in parentheses there. BOK is an abbreviation for body of knowledge. For comprehensive GIS education, that is kind of our go-to. When I say our, not necessarily Levin College or CSU, but nationally speaking, this is the body of knowledge that GIS professionals are embarking upon. It was originally published in 2006. There have been a few updates to the body of knowledge. It undergoes periodic review to stay abreast of new developments in technology and professional specializations, but it doesn't change much. It hasn't changed much since 2006. Something that I want to point out is that rarely are GIS professionals experts in all of the defined areas of the body of knowledge. After foundational concepts, which is what we'll be talking about in this class, GIS professionals typically find a direction that suits their academic background and or professional trajectory. So that means that you know how to use a GIS, and you're thinking, how do I use GIS to advance research or knowledge in application-based things like environmental science, engineering, public works, planning, public administration, things like that. So that's what I mean in terms of GIS as a tool for you to further your knowledge of specific or specializations that you have in your academic interests, but also thinking about what do I want to do with this GIS knowledge? Do I want to make this into a career, or do I want to keep this as a tool in my tool belt in your academic or career trajectory? And you'll notice that there are links here, the GIS body of knowledge and the original publication. You can click on these links and it will take you to the website for UCGIS's body of knowledge. You can explore the website if you wanted to pause this recording and take a look. Feel free to do that. I'm not going to do that in this video, but it is there for you to view and explore at your leisure. Again, the GIS and T breadth of knowledge categories. Again, this link will take you to these categories that are listed on this PowerPoint slide. On the left, in bold, foundational concepts, knowledge economy, GIS and T in society, cartography and visualization, and computing platforms. Those are the primary things that we'll be covering in the introductory class, in this principles class. And you'll see another list along the right: programming and development, data capture, data management, analytics and modeling, and domain-based applications. That gets a little bit more into computer programming, software development. So it kind of goes beyond cartography and more of how to handle the data that's within your GIS. And as we learn more about spatial data and GIS, you'll see how programming, data capture, management, analytics are all data-based, based on the information that you have within your GIS and different ways of understanding the information that you have within it. So not necessarily that list, but again, the foundational concepts, knowledge economy, GIS and society, kind of how does mapping within our world and how we understand our world, cartography and visualization, and computing platforms is our primary focus this semester. Excuse me. I wanted to point out the difference between a certification and a degree. So we offer a GIS certificate at the Levin College, undergrad or graduate. Honestly, there's no difference in the content of the courses between undergrad and grad, aside from an additional research piece that we have for graduate students as a requirement for graduate education. But the certification is the 3 courses, 4 credits apiece. It's not a degree. It is kind of a step in the right direction, kind of feeling out whether GIS is something that you want to use as a tool in your profession, and then understanding or thinking about, well, where do I want to go with it from here? So a certificate is a document stating you have completed a certain amount of training in preparation for a specific job. The GIS certification that we have here at Levin is designed to make you proficient in introductory concepts, and it's intended to make you proficient as a GIS technician. Once you earn your 4-year degree, not in GIS, but in your actual major and degree, that is where the content knowledge, you know about the environment, you know about land, you know about infrastructure, and coupling that knowledge with how do I use a GIS to understand those things better. Most certificate programs prepare people for technical or skills-based jobs. So because of it only being 3 courses, clearly you're not going to get all of the GIS education that you might need to be a GIS professional, but it gets you started and it gives you a working knowledge of the software, how to do things. In this first class, we use QGIS because it's free, it's open source, and a lot of our employers and students have been asking for an alternative to proprietary software. If you decide to go on to GIS methods and GIS applications, the 2nd and 3rd course in the GIS certification, you will move from using QGIS to use ESRI's ArcGIS. That is a proprietary software. It is the industry standard, but QGIS is catching up as the alternative, which is why we're introducing it as part of the GIS Principles class, and that's new this year. So in contrast to a certificate or certification, a degree is an academic title you receive after completing several years of education in a certain subject. Many jobs require a degree in their specified field to get hired. And in those job descriptions, you may see knowledge of GIS helpful, knowledge of GIS preferred, but that's not necessarily the job itself. Again, your content knowledge of planning, of engineering, environmental science, public health, police and fire, public safety, those are kind of the academic side, and then how to use a GIS to further your knowledge or analysis or research around those different academic areas or disciplines or career trajectories. Having a degree can also qualify you for more advanced or higher paying positions. A certification can as well, on top of something else. So certification doesn't replace a degree, but it does help. It's a complementary to your degree. So most of you are enrolled in a 4-year degree program. Some of you may be enrolled as a non-degree seeking just to get the certificate, and that's fine too. You're probably taking it as a way to advance in your career, and knowing that having these technical skills will be helpful. Moving on, the GIS certificate, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. Again, I mentioned that the certificate is intended to meet technical level position description. A GIS technician is typically the job title. Introduction, core concepts of geography and cartography, basic skills in using free mapping platforms and GIS. Intermediate, GIS methods, is moving from basic knowledge of mapping to analytical processes GISs can do. One of the phrases or terminology that's used is geoprocessing. What are some of the specific things that tools within the GIS that you can use to analyze information? And then GIS Applications is the capstone course. It's mastering the ability to prepare a GIS project from start to finish with little to no technical support. Of course, we help you if you need it, but it's really supposed to be for you to showcase, here's what I've gotten out of this certificate program. Here is some content information related to my discipline or one of my interests, and how I am going to create a GIS project for that thing. It's also a great project to include as a sample of work in your portfolio, job interviews, applications, things like that. Moving on, wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between a certificate in GIS and a degree in GIS. So GIS degrees typically include additional specialized courses in a few different key areas. So think back to when we were looking at the GIS Body of Knowledge and the list. So there were the introductory concepts, and then there were the things that we weren't necessarily going to do in this class, but making you aware that there are more aspects to GIS than just the hands-on practice with the software. Some of the different key areas that are included in a degree versus certificate program, one of them is remote sensing. We'll talk a little bit about remote sensing in this course, and we'll do a few remote sensing activities. But remote sensing in itself is almost, it's its own class, it's its own specialization. And remote sensing is about using satellite images to analyze land cover, using ultraviolet light and different bands of the ultraviolet spectrum to understand information from satellite photography. So satellite imagery and remote sensing are kind of hand in hand. Again, that is its own dimension of GIS. And some might say it's not even GIS at all, that remote sensing is remote sensing. But you can view satellite imagery through a GIS, and you can display different information associated with satellite imagery in a GIS, but you can't do all of the satellite imagery analysis with a GIS that you can do with remote sensing specific software. And at this time, as far as I know, we don't offer a remote sensing course at CSU. There may have been one in the environmental sciences program, but it has gone away for now. Hopefully it'll be back. But I also recommend Youngstown State. They have an online remote sensing course. So that might be something that, you know, in the future you're interested in, and you can pursue that. We just don't have it at CSU. It's also typically included in a 4-year GIS degree or a GIS graduate degree. Some of the other key areas are surveying instruments. That gets into engineering a little bit more. What are different ways that you can capture data, GPS, and other types of instruments that you can take out into the field to collect information from the field and then translate it from your device, data capture device, your surveying instrument, to a GIS. Statistical modeling. For GIS 2, we do have a basic statistics requirement, and it's mostly so that we feel comfortable with students' knowledge of basic descriptive statistics. But in a GIS degree, you have advanced statistics and statistical modeling that's part of your degree program. So some logic, some math, and some specialized tools for modeling different statistics that are drawn from the data that you have. I've mentioned programming. GIS developer has become a more popular job title lately, and that really gets into coding and different computer programming languages that are out there. Python is the most popular for GIS development right now. And the next part is data visualization. We're going to do a map itself is data visualization. So it's not a far-fetched or a different key area, but there are other things that you can use to visualize geographic information. Moving on, GIS Concepts and Activities, kind of an overview of the topics that we're going to talk about this semester, kind of week by week. What is a GIS? History of cartography. History of cartography could take up a whole semester in itself. We're just going to do a cursory overview of kind of how this idea of maps became part of our world. GIS-based organizations that can be helpful in supporting your GIS knowledge, GIS standards and procedures, GIS jobs. But I point this out because you want to be a member of something if you are serious about GIS. And so later on in this PowerPoint, I'll point out a few that are kind of the go-tos for you to be a part of. Hopefully they have free student memberships. We also have, I'll talk more about some specific organizations later. We'll talk about spatial thinking and data visualization kind of conceptually and how our brain works with respect to spatial thinking and how it's different from other types of thinking. Cartographic concepts, good foundational things, how maps are made, how do we transfer our understanding of a globe to a flat surface, projections, latitude and longitude, some of those cartographic concepts that have a geographic base. Mapping platforms and types of maps. So there are different types of mapping platforms. And what's the difference between a GIS and, let's say, Google Maps per se? Google Maps is an internet mapping technology. It is not a GIS. However, it has a lot of the information. It can do a few things that a GIS can do, but what it can't do is analysis. And that's what the difference between a GIS and an internet mapping platform like Google Earth or Bing Maps, some of those mapping platforms that are out there, they can't perform the analysis for you, but they do provide a really good resource for data. And you can transfer data between mapping platforms. So if you find something in Google Earth and you want to bring that into a GIS to work more on that particular thing or learn more about that particular thing that you have found in a mapping platform, you can do that. And we'll review different file types and some of the different platforms and files in this class. Different fields using GIS, a little bit of applications to help you feel more comfortable with, like, is this right for me and my major? To give you some examples. Spatial data types. There are different data formats that are used in GIS, particularly between satellite imagery, the file type for that versus other types of spatial data types. How do we acquire data? Do we create it? Do we download it? Do we find it? Does somebody give it to us? This acquiring data piece is pretty important, knowing where to find data and what do you do with it once you have it. Cursory overview of databases. The GIS has kind of the visual part in the front where you can see, what a country looks like or a city looks like, and all that spatial data that helps with boundaries and rivers and mountains and houses and all those different features that are within a mapping platform. All of those have characteristics that are associated with them called attributes. And the attributes, so what you see on the screen of a GIS or in a mapping platform, there are hidden tables in the background that hold more information about those things. And so we'll look at databases and attributes of information. We'll do some querying and analyzing of data, not terribly in depth, but more of like, what is a query? How do I use it? How do I do it? And how do I analyze data from that query? Is a query itself analysis? Sure, if you are deriving results, then that is an analysis of information. Analyze a location using existing data and platform, observe and measure spatial phenomenon by major field of interest. So the final project for QGIS is a Cleveland-based project. So For those of you that are from Cleveland, it'll be a familiar area, and it asks you to do a series of steps in order to solve a problem. So moving on, what is a GIS? What is it? Again, just kind of cursory, GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. This is, AKA, it's a digital mapping system. Again, different from an internet mapping technology. I have heard GIS can also stand for GIS Science. I prefer Geographic Information System for this because the system actually describes the software platform that you're using, whereas GIS Science is more of kind of the concepts and possibilities that exist in using a GIS. Geographic information, so kind of the different components, we're going to break GIS into a couple parts. So the GI, geographic information, is anything that has a position on Earth and can be stored in a GIS. It has coordinates, it has a definitive location. So geographic information is anything that has a position on Earth, and that can be stored in the GIS. And then the second part, where I was prior when I was describing databases and attributes, the GIS is an information system. It's the hardware and the software used to store and analyze the geographic data. Our focus will be on the geographic concepts and how they translate to an information system. You'll also explore existing GISs and learn QGIS. The different places that you can use a GIS. These are some of the most kind of popular or most well-known uses or fields that use GIS. Government uses GIS a lot. My previous position before coming to Cleveland State, I was a GIS manager within a county government planning office, and they had a countywide GIS for a number of different things, but it was available to the public. And that was part of my job. I was managing spatial information related to planning and construction for the county. So government, clearly a user of GIS. I mean, the private sector and nonprofit as well, but government more so. Private sector also uses GIS a lot. They have a different price structure associated with their use of GIS. And in the private sector, GIS is used to complete work for clients. It's used a lot in planning and construction. It's used a lot in utilities, particularly in data capture for utilities, where you're going out to the field and making sure that electric wires are connected or where to note a problem. Underground infrastructure, pipes. That was one of the things that I was working on before I became a GIS manager, as I was the GIS coordinator for creating the spatial data for underground sewer systems, so water pipes that were below ground. And that was for the federal government, actually. Academia uses it a lot. I mean, here we are. A lot of our faculty in the college use GIS. I know there's a couple GIS specialists in business, a couple GIS specialists in environmental science, some in public health. We have a GIS center within the Levin College called the Northern Ohio Data Information Service. They are an academic center and they provide GIS work to clients. Often GIS is used in environmental and natural resources, agriculture and soils. Really the start of GIS and the start of disseminating map information was through military intelligence. That was really the first use for maps was for military purposes. What are our boundaries? What are our assets? What are our borders? What are we trying to protect? Are we collecting information on our adversaries? Things like that. Surveying and mapping their land. So recently, emergency and public safety purposes. One of the public GISs that you'll work on later on in the semester has to do with crime calls in Cleveland. There has been more of a need for people with GIS experience within emergency services. So working for the fire department, working for the police department, EMS, a lot of routing. What's the fastest way to get from point A to point B? That is a lot of how public safety uses GIS, but also to map safety or unsafe areas. And that kind of goes along with transportation and navigation. That's also associated with the origins of mapping as we know it. Had to do with navigation, sailing across the sea. How do I get to where I'm going? Surveying and engineering. Engineering uses it a lot. And surveying again is more of an engineering specific, but that information, that data capture that's out in the field can be brought into a GIS, and usually is. Mining and oil, again, that could go with utilities. Again, more recently, health and epidemiology, understanding public health occurrences. There's been a plethora of COVID-19 GIS analysis more recently. So the implications for GIS to be used in public health and safety is growing. And archaeology and history. I think I actually have a student in here now who this class was suggested by an archaeology professor, and what a great suggestion. Where do you dig? What kinds of things are around that area? Whose land is it? What is your site? Things like that, and the history of it. At the bottom of this page, you'll see a link that says 1,000 uses of GIS. That's going to be associated with your easy assignment for this week, which is to take a look at that link and see if there are examples that you can identify with based on your interests or what you are interested in within your disciplines. And so 1,000 uses of GIS is a fun list of how GIS has been used for lots of different things. Moving on, geography and cartography. Geography is visually replicated and displayed through cartography. So we understand the world around us. We understand the geography of the world around us through cartography. And so cartography is the art and science of graphically representing a geographic area, usually on a flat surface such as a map or chart. So how do we take that globe and flatten it out? It typically involves, or it may involve, the superimposition layers of political, cultural, or other non-geographic divisions onto the representation of a geographical area. That was one of the things. Some people say geographical information systems. In my estimation, that sounds weird. I always say geographic information systems. I just think it sounds weird to say geographical information systems, but some people say tomato, some people say tomato. We both still know what we're talking about. So what that means is that you can create information that goes over geography. GIS is really about layering information on top of each other and deciding, like, what information do I need to do what I want to do? Do I need something else? Well, what if I introduce a new variable? Let's see what that looks like. Cartography is really the foundation of GIS, and its concepts are relevant and necessary to understand how a GIS works and what a GIS can do. And that has been evident in the past couple of years, which is why we have added a little bit more of the foundational cartographic concepts into this course. Moving on to GIS organizations. These were kind of the go-tos of GIS organizations I wanted to point out to you. The GIS Certification Institute, GISCI, that is the organization which bestows the GISP credential. GISP stands for GIS Professional, and it is a national organization. In order to earn your GISP, you have to have X amount of experience, which they're kind of flexible on the experience. It could be an internship, it could be projects, things like that, but you also have to take an exam. So again, these foundational principles and concepts and the things that you're going to learn in the GIS certificate go towards your understanding or the information that you are being tested on for the GISP exam. URISA, URISA, Urban and Regional Information Systems Association. They're a big one. They're very active. They also have, I believe, the GIS Corps, kind of volunteer corps. There's a group that you can volunteer to be a part of GIS projects in a nonprofit capacity, or you provide some sort of GIS expertise or technical assistance for projects that people put out there, governments, nonprofits. And so ERISA is pretty well connected to that. We also have a membership to ERISA at CSU. And when we renew, we usually have about 10 extra student memberships that we include. So when that renewal comes up, I'll let you know and I'll see if any of you want to join ERISA. I'm a member. They've got great newsletters and great information and a good connection. UCGIS, this again was the organization that is kind of the repository for the GIS Body of Knowledge that we reviewed earlier in this presentation, UCGIS. And then we have GITA, Geospatial Information and Technology Association. That's a little bit more broad in its scope. As you can see, the technology component of it, it's a little bit more geospatial than GIS specific. But again, a really good organization to be familiar with if you're in GIS land. Here's a list of more GIS organizations with links. American Congress on Surveying and Mapping, American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, Association of American Geographers. You know, if you're a geographer, you know about GIS. And really, if you're a GIS user, you're kind of almost a de facto geographer. So keep that in mind. Not only are you a GIS technician or specialist, you also have knowledge and expertise in cartography and understanding of geographic information, which makes you a bit of a geographer. Cartography and Geographic Information Society, International Cartographic Association, International Geographical Union, National Center for Geographic Information and Analysis, National Council for Geographic Education, National Society of Professional Surveyors, National States Geographic Information Council, North American Cartographic Information Society, and Society for Conservation GIS. So some of you could probably see how it connects to your discipline or interests, and all of those are links, and I'll let you take a look at those organizations at your leisure. And most important, GIS Support Sites. These are sites that are really good, and I link to them a lot in the PowerPoints and part of the lectures. GIS Lounge, GIS Cafe, and GIS Geography. These are really great sites. They're not overly technical. They provide you with lots of like free readings, some links to other tutorials, technical assistance, jobs, projects, all sorts of things. But these are the three that I use the most when I'm floundering a bit with, I don't know this new GIS technology or this new concept. I also refer students to them or people that are starting out. These are kind of like my bookmarked GIS sites. I share them with you. I don't know. That is the end of this lecture. What I'm going to ask you to do for this week is I have an introductions discussion board post so I can get to know you and we could get to know each other. And also the 1,000 uses of GIS, that link that I mentioned in this discussion, that I'm going to ask you to take a look at that 1,000 uses of GIS and pick a couple that you feel like, yeah, I could do that, or yeah, I could see myself in that kind of role or doing that kind of analysis.